Let's move ahead and talk about the Duke Blue Devils. We've talked about them nonstop over the past few weeks. They are the number one team in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But Kerry, DG, all of a sudden, John Shire's Blue Devils are getting beat up in the front court, in the back court, support players. I mean, this team is starting to get worn down maybe a little bit, and they are being injured. Maybe not season-ending injuries, but definitely things that are making them be more creative in their lineups. Now, they'll have a big game against Wake Forest and another big game against North Carolina this week. But how much of a concern is that, David Glenn, for John Shire going into March?
Yeah, I'm glad I get to go first on this one because I'd love to plant a seed for when Coach Keating jumps in, specifically through his coach's eyes, how much it matters that players miss practice for injury reasons. Because in my 38 years doing this stuff, my eyes have been opened many times by perspectives that coaches I respect provide where maybe my assumption was not correct. So I look forward to his part of this answer. But I'll say this, whether you look at any ACC championship team or any team that's won the national title, Duke included, they not only had, of course, superstar players. I mean, there's this massive connection between NBA caliber talent and being able to win the NCAA title that I've explored through articles and some of our videos. And I mean, I'm going back 70 years. You better have NBA caliber dudes if you want to compete for an NCAA title. The evidence is just overwhelming for that to back up that statement. But you also need some role players. And the reality is that after Duke's starting lineup, which is young, there are only 4 full-time starters in the entire freshman class in the ACC this year. 3 of them are at Duke, and Cooper Flagg, Con Knueppel, and the big guy Kamen Malawach. So you're young and you need support, no matter how talented you are. Well, their best off-the-bench player is Malik Brown, now out for the second stretch and missing practice time. Another really good player for them, in this case a starter, is Tyrese Proctor. Now, they do say both of these guys are going to be back, but when are they going to be back? And at what percent? Is he going to have a bulky shoulder buckle, on Malik Brown that may limit him in some way? How close to 100% will Tyrese Proctor be? These are important players. So I would be nervous as a coach, in part because Caleb Foster off the bench is an up and down guy. I would not consider him uber reliable as a sophomore. Patrick Gongbo, one of their top big guys off the bench, certainly a promising prospect, but only recently, relatively recently, has he been getting significant minutes. Mason Gillis, the Purdue transfer, is a nice player, but nice three-point shooter, 3-and-D type guy, but not. Maybe you could say he's consistent because of experience, but if I were John Shire, I would want more predictability, more reliability off the bench. Right now, the guy we talked about last week, Isaiah Evans, the freshman, who seriously might turn his late part of his freshman year explosion into first-round NBA draft status. It could happen this year. The young man from the Fayetteville area who played high school ball near Charlotte, if he continues on his current path, that's a great weapon for John Shire, usually off the bench, maybe in the starting role. I think he was plugged into the starting lineup recently for one game because of the injuries. But I don't think you want Isaiah Evans taking more shots than Cooper Flagg, which I think happened, in one of his recent games. Like you got to cultivate a new chemistry with Isaiah Evans going from a few minutes months ago to being maybe the most important guy off the bench now. I mean, I love his productivity. I love his three-point stroke. I love his confidence, his swagger. But the young man also needs to be reminded that Cooper Flagg guy needs to be the starting point for everything that Duke does. And even Isaiah Evans probably shouldn't be taking 15 to 18 shots in any game unless it's some kind of runaway Duke victory.
Davey talked about managing these guys as you get later in the season. When you take a look at Duke's roster and you hit the nail on the head, obviously, with Isaiah Evans working his way into starter type minutes as a de facto sixth starter. It just so happened that Tyrese Proctor's stretch of 37 straight starts back to last year, broken with the knee injury, and obviously they expect to have him back. But that's just one of the possibilities that they're going to have to replace. And the one that they can't afford to replace and have no replacement for, as you mentioned, is Flagg. as it relates to trying to balance it out in practice, from our perspective, and again, I was fortunate enough to coach as a head coach teams that played all the way to April twice. We actually won the CIT and the CBI, although people nowadays are like, what the hell acronym is that? Well, it was a postseason tournament. We had to keep playing and practicing. But we had an early conference tournament at the WCC back then for TV purposes. When ESPN and everyone else was jockeying for putting on these events, they couldn't all put them on the same week. The WCC fell a week early. So we actually ended our season a week before. So we had to wait 2 weeks to start for the beginning of postseason. And then we had another 2.5 week run a month after we were done. By that time, you're basically conditioning. You're keeping your conditioning up. You still want to stay sharp by being able to kind of implement some things. And for us, maybe it was a tweak here or there for our defensive stuff. And that certainly happened with a senior laden and upperclassman laden team we had in winning the 2013 CBI by changing a little bit of defense. But that was because we had that time. We actually had extra time in 2 weeks to put that in. But we're not going to be doing any real heavy contact. I will say this, though, as I think about it, and maybe this was my naivete as a young coach. We played the CIT year mostly on the road and actually finished that by winning at Iona. The beauty of those games from a coach's perspective was they weren't neutral site games. They certainly weren't NCAA games or even an NIT game, although the NIT has shifted to on-campus sites. We had to go to other places. We had to win at San Francisco. We had to win at SMU. We had to win at Wright State, at Purdue. We won at Purdue when you beat Matt Painter in Mackey. We had to win at George Mason to win the CBI, but the CIT one in 2011 was at Iona, and it was the last week of March. And of course, Iona for me is back home. It's in the tri-state area. I grew up in New York and New Jersey area. I had a lot of friends coming to that game, but a lot of the coaching friends I had came to practice the day before our final game. And I remember one coach in particular who was one of my coaches when I played at Seton Hall, Bruce Hamburger, one of the greatest tacticians that have ever lived. He's one of those under the radar guys, never elevated to a very high level, but was a guy that was a high level assistant. And I never forget this after practice. He's like, holy crap, you guys go that hard all the time? I didn't even realize it. We were so juiced up to play in the final game, but we had been practicing like it was October. And that was one of the beauties of that team. But when I look back on it, I'm like, oh man, thank goodness. I mean, we were going at it, diving on loose balls, blocking guys out. You know, like we didn't know. And maybe again, that was my naivete of being a first-time head coach in a postseason event. We certainly did not do that 2 years after in the CBI, although we had to play some extra games in a best-of-3 series with George Mason and had to travel back and forth in between. You try to manage that down. You're usually 2.5 hours in the beginning of the season. By the time you're getting to February, certainly to March, you're not really going live for more than 10, 20 minutes at a time. Some key things, maybe you have your scout team in there. I'll say this also, too. We had a season-ending injury at UCLA when one of our starters in a walkthrough stepped on the foot of a walk-on in a walkthrough. Oh. Things can happen anytime, anywhere. If you go into that trying to avoid injury, that's usually when it happens in the practices. So you kind of just don't want them to change because the players, especially younger ones, they don't really know how to adjust to that. The older guys kind of do, the vets do. I think in the case of Duke, you're treading lightly now that these injuries have happened in games. You need to have them back for what's going to be a stretch run. You got to think they're going to play in the ACC final, and by all accounts, are going to at least play 4, if not 5 or 6 games in March, right? So this is still and you think about that now, guys. 20, 30 games, you got another possibly 10 more to go, right? As long as the season are, it gets condensed at the end of the season because you got Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday. You have, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, ACC tournament. You have to be really detailed, and you really got to trust your preparation up until that point. There isn't a lot of wiggle room to change a lot of things, but I think the number one thing, and this is really important for Duke, is that managing practice and managing guys not doing anything crazy in practice so that they're all hands on deck for games is of primary importance. I think this thing is going to be the number one issue going forward for Duke is if they can stay healthy because they've seen the replacement for Evans for Proctor for a little bit, but not every guy looks like Malik Brown. Not every guy's 6'9" with that type of body experience, and certainly no one else is Cooper Flagg. It'll be the only thing that can derail them potentially for some crazy day happening where they can't make it and the other team can't miss, of them not getting to the Final Four at some point, having a chance to cut down the nets at the end of the season.
NC Port, raising the bacon, raising the bar.